Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow on the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and we are doing our thing. Feast week is behind us. We had a heck of a time with those MTE events, early season tournaments. It was a great overall week with lots of green screens flooding the FTN Discord. Simply love to see it. I'm very excited about the first 3 weeks of the season for us, and I'm very much so looking forward to the rest of it. Before you know it, we're going to be in conference play, and you're going to blink, and all of a sudden we're going to be in the tournament. It's just going to go super, super quick, especially with college football winding down. We are into conference championship week for college football. Things are going absolutely bonkers. Do still have the promotion I want to talk to you about going on Night Hoops. Use the code Night Hoops, NIGHTHOOPS. That gets you 50% off your first month, any subscription to the FTN Daily website there. There's multiple packages, NBA with college basketball. There's the daily plus monthly, which is all the sports included, pro sports, esports, college, all that good stuff. Not only do you get access to our magnificent articles, but you also get access to our optimizers, projections, pre-lock shows that are only done for the subs, great Discord coverage where we're listing all the starting lineups, breaking news, frequently getting out from under late scratches or starting lineup changes. How often do we see a guy for 30% own that we were able to get off? Just a very great tool to have in your arsenal. Get with FTN, check out what we have to offer, and get yourself some additional bankroll heading into March. You're going to need it. So check us out for that first month. If you don't like it, you don't have to stay, but I'm confident that you'll dig what we have to offer. All right, so we have ourselves a pretty nifty slate that we're going to talk about here. It's a 7-gamer, not huge, but still in our wheelhouse. Anything above 6 games is definitely a good thing. We are able to find enough leverage and have ownership spread out enough to where it's not a whole bunch of overlap. And it's not a gigantic 15-game slate or something where you're just drowning in options. We also went through a ton of blowout pre-lock projected blowouts in today's slate. This one is a complete difference turnaround. There are competitive games galore, high majors. This is going to be a really fun slate. This would have been a prime slate for DraftKings, especially to maybe drop a qualifier to the Mania or perhaps a little bit of extra. Typically, you'll see Tuesdays and Saturdays once college football season ends. That's usually when you'll get the biggest slates, the biggest prizes, biggest contests, that kind of thing. The $12 GPP is just a 2K to first. I know for some of you that's not the greatest thing in the world. There are some other bracket satellites into the Mania qualifiers and a variety of other contests to get into. But overall, just keep grinding. Do what you can handle with your bankroll and continue to play every day. If it's worth doing at all, it's worth doing right. And this is a sport just like any other. You don't want to miss a slate or 2 or 3 or 4 and fall behind. You need to stay plugged in. You need to stay connected. You need to know who is who, what's going on with usage rates, what are DVPs looking like, all that good stuff. You find yourself, falling behind after a couple slates. It's really hard to get back in it. However, you do have us to assist with that. So if you do need to take a little break, have no fear. You can jump right into it with me, and I'll make sure that you are well aware of what's going on for each and every slate. If you're watching live, I appreciate it. Or if you're on demand, please make sure you help me out. Hit that like button, share the show, interact, all that good stuff. It helps with our views, helps the show be seen within YouTube's algorithm. FTN Network is going to the moon. We have a lot of exciting stuff planned for 2024, a lot of cool changes as well. And I'm excited to introduce a few things with college basketball as well here pretty soon within the next maybe couple of weeks. So bear with me, keep grinding, and let's get into this slate. We're going to start off with this first game here, which is LSU versus Syracuse. This is a true pick'em on DraftKings, 150.5 total. Pretty solid there. On Ken Palm, he has it projected 76-75 in favor of LSU. They are top 60 in defensive efficiency, top 90 in offensive efficiency, 138th in tempo ranking. You have Syracuse playing the 36th fastest tempo in the country right now under Adrian Autry, 119th in defensive efficiency, 135th in offensive efficiency. In the Maui Invitational, a couple of tough losses there to Syracuse and Gonzaga. They were not competitive whatsoever. They did knock Chaminade around, so good on them. Now they've got a home matchup here against LSU in the challenge. For Syracuse, looking at it, they're still going to run a fairly short rotation. Doesn't matter if it's Coach Boeheim or Coach Autry. We're typically going to see a 7-8 man rotation. Starting lineup still remains J.J. Starling, Justin Taylor, Judah Mintz, Naheem McLeod, and Chris Bell. Off the bench, we're looking at Malik Brown, Kyle Cuffley, Quadir Copeland, and Benny Williams. Still no sign of Benny Williams into the starting lineup just yet. Played the game against Colgate, hardly played. Played 16 minutes against Tennessee. Then he didn't play at all against Gonzaga. Then he played 13 minutes. Really hard to use him. He's such a prime candidate to transfer. I would have thought he would transfer before the season started. He's sitting there at 3.8. If something changed, I don't know, ends up in the starting lineup here against LSU at 3.8, he would be an absolute lock button type play. But as it stands right now, as a bench piece, you can't even really consider using him in anything other than a GPP lineup. Now, I know he's put up some pretty decent fantasy totals in 2 of his 3 games, considering the minutes he's played. He does have a high usage rate as well, but there's just not enough minutes there for him to really be considered. So take it easy with Benny Williams at the moment. We know how good he is, but we're just not there yet with him. Kyle Cuffey at 4K. I would worry about his minutes. I know he played more against Chaminade, but in competitive games, he really hasn't been able to play more than 8 to 9 minutes, so really not looking at him. Copeland has upside. We know that. He put up 36 against Chaminade. In the first game of the season against New Hampshire, he put up 32. We need big minutes. We need 20-plus minutes for Copeland, but I don't know that he's going to get that ordinarily. So at 4 or 5, I'm not so sure we're there with him yet either. They will need Naheem McLeod and his big body defense and paint, protection. He's 5'1", a little bit tougher to pay that price for him, but I do foresee him playing 20-ish minutes. He has scored 20-plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. He's fine. Last man in type of play, that is fine. It's forward slot. You could use him, but he's very low-end option overall. Malik Brown, not playing enough minutes. And then Chris Bell. If you believe Chris Bell is here to stay, I mean, I'm not really looking to play him at 4 or 5 or 4K, so I'm certainly not looking to play him at 5, 8, 6K, especially here against LSU. He had some pretty damn big games in Maui, and he took a ton of shots, 13, 18, 13. The game against Colgate, he took 19 shots. Just been absolutely chucking and ramming threes. 1 for 10 against Gonzaga, but that volume is pretty wild to see for Bell. It looks like it's going to continue for now, but still, unless he's super efficient knocking them down, he's taken 40 already, which is the most on the team, right around 30%. It's tough to really feel like, hey, he's going to pay off this price. He does have a 30% shot rate, which is up there with Judah Mintz for the team lead right now, for what it's worth. Taylor at 5'7", he's been steady. Did put up a big game against Chaminade, but he's typically going to be a low, 20 fantasy point per game score. I'm not too high on him at 5'7". He's certainly okay, but definitely not a priority play. It comes down to the decision of J.J. Starling, who's priced up at 6'5" now. Early in the season, we got him for a discount. It seems he's found himself a home here in Syracuse. He's playing very steady, 6'5". It's a little bit on the high end, but I do like this spot for him against LSU. I do think he'll continue to perform, but there is some upside questions there for me at an almost 7K price tag. And then Judah Mintz at 8.7. His price has dropped from almost 10K down to 8.7 after a pretty mediocre game in the blowout. He wasn't really needed. Expect him to get, somewhere between 30 to 35 minutes against LSU. He's fine. He's an okay play if you want to go there. I'm not as high on Syracuse side as I am the LSU side, though. That's for sure. On the LSU side, we have some fantasy goodness here. Under Matt McMahon, they look like they're going to compete. Overtime win over Wake Forest. They did suffer that close neutral court loss to Dayton. They beat a very tough North Texas team, handled North Florida, and then the somewhat embarrassing loss early in the season in Nichols. But I think they've put that behind them quickly. They have this opportunity to prove themselves against Syracuse. Then they have a game against Kansas State coming up, a game against Texas coming up. So there's going to be some more opportunities for Matt McMahon's club to prove they belong. Will Baker, we'll start with him. He has been absolutely automatic. He just has not failed us at all. The big decision point now, though, will be he's 6'4". He's no longer 4'1". He's no longer 5'5". It's a 6'4" price point. Can he continue to produce at such a high level? He is starting. His minutes, which were relatively spotty in the first couple of games, have really solidified as they played more competitive games and in the MTE tournament that they were just in. There is a little upside taken away at 6'4", but this matchup against Syracuse is fantastic. Syracuse is playing less zone than before, still a fair amount, but they're definitely playing less. A lot of matchup, man-to-man, combo zone. The Syracuse Orange are awful on the glass. They are almost at the bottom of college basketball when it comes to defensive rebounding efficiency. They're almost at the bottom when it comes to offensive rebounding efficiency. They're just not very aggressive. They're playing fast. They're not great. They're not hitting their threes. They're bricking a lot of shots. There are a ton of rebounds going around, and big men are definitely having some solid games against the Syracuse team. We've in the past been able to target who's going to play the high post. Passing big men against Syracuse has been a huge moneymaker for us in the past. They just gave up 12 and 13 to Anton Watson. Graham Ike had 16 and 14 against them. That was big. On the Tennessee game, Triple J had a 15 and 12. Dalton Connect had 17. Jonas Idu murdered them with a double-double, 11 rebounds, 14 points. We're seeing a pattern that we can expect to continue for the rest of the season. Even Braden Smith, who I loved in that Colgate versus Syracuse game, he had 11 rebounds. He's the point guard for them. He had 11 rebounds, flirted with a triple-double. Their big Keegan Records did have 17 points and 13 rebounds himself. So two big performances there. You could even look over at the New Hampshire team, which was on the slate today against UConn. Their star, Clarence Daniels, 21 points, 7 rebounds, 44% usage rate. He gave them a lot of problems. New Hampshire was in that game for quite a while for what it's worth. You need one more to look at. The power forward on Canisius, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 9 shots taken, over 30% usage rate. We have ourselves here a DVP spot that is golden. So Will Baker's in play. He has to be 7-footer. He can pass a little bit. He can knock down jumpers. He can shoot threes. He's just an overall problem. He's playing extremely well. Matt McMahon's system is perfect for him. Now, we saw Baker, little used player during the COVID year at Texas, really developed himself into a good basketball player at Nevada, developed a three-point shot 41% his first year at Nevada. He's somebody who is just a real problem. And I think we could be looking at Will Baker a little bit differently than years past. We could be talking about a guy who maybe raises his price up to 8K with the performances that we're expecting. So 6'4" initially might be a sticker shock for what we're accustomed to, but I also think here in 2-3 weeks or as we get into SEC play, we might look back and be like, damn, I wish I had Will Baker at 6'4" right now. This 9K price is kind of high. So I do not have an issue using Will Baker in the forward slot. I am a believer. I was not a believer on him heading into the season, but he has definitely proven. And I think here against Syracuse, we're probably talking about a 20-point, 12 rebound type of game, and he's absolutely going to shatter this price point. So it starts with him. We also have Jalen Reed as the GPP pivot. He's 5'2", much cheaper. He's had 20 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. He does have a bit of fouling issues, but he has proven himself to be a high fantasy point per minute player. He struggled against North Texas. The defense and the way that North Texas slows things down really bothered him, but he bounced back in a big way against an overmatched Wake Forest front court. He's just very, very aggressive. He's shot blocker extraordinaire. You're looking at some of his rates: 24.4% usage rate, 9.2% block rate, a defensive rebounding rate over 19%. He is somebody who is also going to be in a good position here to pan out against the Syracuse team. I think a lot more people would naturally look to Baker, but that 5.2 price tag on Reed is certainly very appealing. He has downside, absolutely. Could he get into foul trouble? Absolutely. But that risk is mitigated there with that cheaper price. So if you find yourself wanting LSU exposure, you can't get to Baker, or perhaps you're not like me and you don't believe in him, then I would recommend you play Jalen Reed. I don't think you want to walk away from this first game without any exposure at all. I think that's a mistake, and it has to be one of Baker or Jalen Reed for my money. You also have Tyrell Ward, who's played over 20 minutes in 4 straight, a couple of 19-plus fantasy point games recently for him. He was very strong against North Florida. He is only 4.4. He is somebody else that I feel pretty comfortable with. The super sophomore, he is coming off the bench, playing consistent minutes, has a usage rate over 20%, knocking down 43% of his threes. That is something that he was surprisingly efficient at last year, shooting almost 36% on 46 attempts. That was in 23 games. Through 6 games, he's already taken 21. So he's looking to take more shots. He's on the floor more. Very good defender, has a steal rate over 3%, drawing over 5 fouls per 40. There's quite a bit of guys on this LSU team with fouls drawn rates over 4, over 3.5, over 5. There's a lot of fantasy goodness here, a lot of point generation, and a lot of free throw shooters. We're going to be able to get some freebies here, especially if this game stays close throughout, or perhaps we get overtime. So really looking at wings and forwards. You also have the guards in play here. Jordan Wright at 6'7", the Vandy transfer. He's good there. He had a big game against Wake. That was a good matchup for him. Overall, you're seeing him put up a lot of 20 to 25 scores. I think his three-point shooting will come in handy here against Syracuse, obviously, but he is a bit high-priced at almost $7K. I think LSU's guard play, they're a little bit more balanced at the guard spots between Wright, the freshman Mike Williams, Carlos Stewart, who transferred over from Santa Clara, Trey Hannibal. They've got a myriad of options here that they will cycle through. Mwani Wilkinson is still around. So it's kind of a tougher spot there for me to pay almost $7K. If you wanted an LSU guard, somebody like Carlos Stewart at 4.8 makes sense for GBP. I know he's been struggling. He hasn't been shooting really at all. That's tough when you have a guy that just kind of refuses to shoot, but his price is starting to dump low enough that we can at least consider him. Trey Hannibal, with his minutes down, it's also hard to get to him at 4.2, but he is there if you need him, and he is capable of hitting 4x at this 4.2 price. We saw him with 20-25 minutes a game last year, easily paying off a price point of 4.2. They do have the transfer from Kentucky over there, Damian Collins. He's at 3.9. You saw in 13 minutes he put up 18 against Nichols. In 18 minutes he put up 12. Mississippi Valley, 16 minutes, he put up 16. So he does have some fantasy point per minute goodness here at 3.9, but he's obviously a very deep dive, long down the priority list, large field GBP play, not a priority at all. So really just looking at the Baker, Reed, Ward conglomerate, you would think Derek Fountain would be in play there too at 4.6. Technically, yes. But his minutes have been kind of all over the place, and I feel like he's going to be the odd man out as Ward and Reed continue to develop, and Baker has established himself as the alpha. There doesn't seem to be a lot of room for Derek Fountain there. Only other player I would consider here is Mike Williams, the freshman. He's playing a lot of minutes. He's very solid. I like this price on him. I think he's actually way better than people probably realize. He is a very opportunistic and aggressive defender. A lot of his points come from steals, which obviously that's kind of tough to rely on. Right now, he's got the 5th best steals rate in all of the country, only shooting 17% from long range. Needs to work on his offensive game, but he does have a 21% shot rate. He is working on a foul rate of his own at almost 4.6 4.6 fouls called per 40. But you see, he definitely has the ability to pay off this 5K price point. And in crunch time, he's typically been on the floor a lot. So close game, opportunity for free throws late. I do like Mike Williams there as another GPP play. But again, priorities being the forwards on LSU. This is a good matchup and one that we're going to want to target pretty much all year round. And you'll remember the last 3 years, Syracuse been on the slate. We've been able to take high post players against them at sub 10%. I have no idea why the rest of the industry had such a hard time figuring that spot out. But I have a feeling that most people will, again, kind of ignore using anyone against Syracuse in the front court. They're going to automatically think, oh, the zone, 3-point shooters. Yeah, 3-point shooters are good, but we know high post really comes with a lot more upside. And that's still going to be an opportunity for a guy like Will Baker, even though Syracuse is playing some more man-to-man. All right, we're going to move on to the next one here. We have the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets post Josh Pastner and into the Damon Stoudemire era, although the on-court product doesn't look a whole lot different. Going up against the Mississippi State Bulldogs, we will start off with Mississippi State. We know Tolo Smith is still out. Him being out has led to Jimmy Bell just breaking out in a big way, kind of a career role player. He has scored over 20 fantasy points in all but one game so far, almost averaging a double-double. That has caused his price to come up to almost 7K. Yes, that's going to be probably the cutoff line for me. And also, Mississippi State hasn't really had the best non-con schedule. They did play a game against Northwestern in which they won, but Tennessee Martin, North Alabama, Nichols, a bad Arizona State team. They did beat a fairly decent Washington State squad last week. But Chris Jans has his guys kind of running, but I haven't seen enough from them yet, at least in terms of their opponents. This is a game against Georgia Tech I feel like they won't have any problem with. They have a North Texas game, that might be somewhat tough. A game against Rutgers coming up in late December. But overall, I don't feel like they're tested, and I think we might end up having the dreaded case of non-con heroes throughout this roster. And Jimmy Bell is somebody that I think once they get into SEC play, he may end up getting stuffed into a locker. But for now, in this matchup against Georgia Tech, he's absolutely in play. It's a bit high, but you can use him. Looking at his rates, he doesn't have the highest usage or shot rate, but he does have a mammoth combined rebounding rate, over 40%, 7% block rate, drawing 6 fouls per 40. When it gets to the everybody else category, you guys know I love the freshman Josh Hubbard. We're on him early in the year. I know at 3-8 against ASU, he played 12 minutes, and everybody kind of looked at me like, why the hell did you have us play this guy? And then you saw the very next game, 21 minutes, 37 fantasy points, 22 minutes, 25, 23 minutes, 15, 27 minutes, 39, 21, 24. His last game against Nichols, over a fantasy point per minute, just continues to come off the bench and chuck. And he's taken a huge number of shots, 9, 14, 11, 13, 12, and 6. So you can see why I was on him to start the season, because I knew this kid is, going to come out here. He didn't come to this team not to play immediately, and their guard play has been kind of suspect throughout the last couple of seasons. Hubbard's going to play, and he's going to play well, and he has done that so far. Love what he brings to the table. 35% shot rate, shooting 41% from long range on 39 attempts. He has a usage rate of 29%. Both of those usage and shot rates, highest on the team. Also an assist rate of 20%, and he draws 5.3 fouls per 40. But the problem is now he's done so well, too well, his price has jumped up to 6.3. Gone are the days of 3.8. And that's just pretty sad, right? He went from 3.8 to 5.1 because I think DK just knew, like, hey, this guy's shooting the shit out of the ball and taking a ton of volume. We need to price him accordingly, and they have. So I think this matchup against Georgia Tech is like phenomenal for his skill set. I would be shocked if he didn't take 15 to 20 shots. And the way he's getting to the foul line in these games too, especially in closer games, you saw he took 7 free throws against Northwestern, 7 against Nichols, 4 against Tennessee Martin. He's getting a ton of volume when it comes to drawing fouls and getting to the free throw line. He's adding assists. He's getting a couple of rebounds. He's adding a steal. He's not just a scorer. As far as GPPs go and alt lineups, I think it would be silly not to have Hubbard exposure. And he's probably going to be super, super low owned, sub 5%, because people are going to look at that 6.3 price tag, see he comes off the bench to play 20 minutes, that's not going to be enough for them. But trust me when I say that he's going to be a real problem for Georgia Tech in this game. Cameron Matthews there at 6'2", got forward eligibility this year. I think he had guard forward eligibility last year. He has been pretty strong. I've struggled to really use him throughout the course of his career, except when he's really cheap. He started out at 7'2", which was a no-go. He's dropped to 6'2", which definitely puts him in play. Doesn't make sense because DK has this dynamic pricing where they've been moving guys that have good games way up, and guys that have pretty bad games, they've tended to fall a little bit. Not as fast as going up, but they've definitely been more dynamic, which I applaud them on. With Matthews, he's had 2 of his last 3 over 30, so the price drop to 6'2" maybe doesn't make quite as much sense there. He's certainly a good play, 25 to 30 minutes. He's going to be a problem as well. His rates are fairly solid across the peripheral categories. He only has a 17.4% shot rate, but his defensive rebounding rate is top 300 in the country at 20.2%. He has a 20% assist rate, 5% steal rate. He's just getting it done in a lot of other categories, and he's playing a little bit out of position, but it's worked out well for him so far. DJ Jeffries, who was once thought to be a real legitimate contender to be player of the year during his time in Memphis in the American Athletic Conference back in, 2021? That would have been his freshman season when they brought in like Boogie Ellis, Lester Quinones, Precious Achua, Tyler Harris was there. He was on that team. Damian Bow was there. Like, that was just a sicko class. James Wiseman, who ended up only being able to play 3 games that year. Like, Penny had just a sicko team. Coming into the next season there, a lot of people in the media had him as the American, conference player of the year in the preseason. It just hasn't worked out for Jeffries. And it's led to us really not being able to use him. When he gets to these sub 6K price tags, it does make me perk up a little bit. And I do kind of look at it like the talent's there. He just has never really been able to put together the consistency. He could certainly drop a 30 in this spot and it wouldn't shock me, but he could also put up 10 and it wouldn't shock me either. So again, another really solid GBP look for Jeffries because nobody will be using him, but he could pan out. 5-1 for Deshaun Davis. He's, seeing his minutes get cannibalized a bit with the emergence of Hubbard. We've seen Trey Ford also. He started the season really, really hot. That ASU game, he knocked down 5 triples, but then it came, find that he's really just reliant on the 3, doesn't add a lot, and he has not been making them like he did against ASU. So he's really kind of cooled off a lot. It's caused his minutes to go down. He's still getting about 12 to 15, but he's cutting into Deshaun Davis. Josh Hubbard's cutting into Deshaun Davis. Shaquille Moore, who is back, he's cutting into Deshaun Davis. So there's a lot of cannibalization of the guard minutes here. The Marshall transfer, Andrew Taylor, who came in, knew he wasn't going to play a role that was like at Marshall, but he's been playing minimal minutes and hardly playing at all. Had some personal stuff to start the season. He's down to 4-3. If we knew with any definity and certainty that he's going to play, I would throw him in there, but it's obviously not a situation that we can do so. And then Sean Jones, he's playing about 15 to 25 minutes as well. So there's just a lot of rotating guards throughout this Mississippi State roster. It makes it difficult to get behind any of them. I would really try to stick to the GBP shares on this team when it comes to Hubbard, Matthews, maybe more, but Jimmy Bell is somebody you could consider in your main if you want. It's a high price, but I do think he pans out. And especially on these tighter price slates, we're seeing lower scores. Raw points are the priority there. Georgia Tech, the Yellow Jackets, they're involved in fantasy, all kinds of fantasy goodness so far under Damon Stoudemire. And that's kind of to be expected with the way that he's coached and the way that he coached Pacific too. At Pacific for 5 years, and they played a style that, they weren't on the slate a lot, but if you look at their game, they put together some fantasy goodness more often than not. Recently just got destroyed by Cincinnati. Now, you'll remember we were all over Cincinnati. The mini stack there ended up hurting because they blew them out so much that none of the starters played more than 22, 23 minutes. Larkin still came through with 15 and 6, 2 blocks and a steal for us, but unfortunately, Dan Skillings didn't. Aziz Bandiago, who did get his waiver to play, came off the bench. He was a menace. It just overall didn't work out, but you'll see right there the way it's played and the points being scored against them. We certainly don't want to shy away from still targeting against them. That game earlier in the season against Howard, Shai Odom absolutely blasted them. Bryce Harris, Joshua Strong, they just give up all sorts of fantasy points. So this is why I think GPP wise, this game could be a game winner, because there is some weird pricing on some of the Mississippi State guys, but they're going to have an opportunity to put up some huge points. Miles Kelly, the most expensive player on the team at 7-3. He's had some shooting woes, 26% in 2 games ago, 37% against Howard, 30% in their last game. He's really struggled to shoot the basketball. A lot of his fantasy, upside comes from his ability to make shots. He does have a 35.8% shot rate. That's top 20 in the country, 31% usage rate, a 8.6% offensive rebounding rate, which is nice to see. And he's drawing almost 7 fouls per 40, but 22% from long range on 23 attempts. Those shots have to start falling. He's okay at 7-3. Not a priority play. I wonder if that's a play, though, because of his high usage that people gravitate towards, or anyone that is doing the little their own, projections or optimizer stuff. Like I could see Kelly maybe carrying some ownership, but I do not foresee him being a very good play here in this spot. That's just my take. Tejon Cloud at 6'5". I don't know that we can use him. He fouls, and when he's not fouling, we're not even guaranteed minutes. And the game against Cincinnati, he just wasn't good. I didn't see an injury there. He has GPP upside at 6'5", but at this point, I'm very elusive when it comes to playing Cloud, and I feel like he's going to be more of that non-con hero that we're dreading. And when they get into conference play, I think he is kind of an afterthought. I would rather go to Courtney Reeves at 6'2". To me, he's a little more consistent. He's a better defender. He contributes in all categories. He just seems to me like a little bit more of a safer option. We do get him for $1K cheaper than Kelly as well. Other players getting minutes at 4K, you have Bay Ndongo, who made his debut against Cincinnati, played 24 minutes, 8 points, 8 rebounds, 3 blocks. Do we think he's going to end up playing? We'll see. He is going to be a big-time factor for this team in the future. It's going to take time. He's obviously a freshman. He's very raw, but the fact that they were able to get him in there, log some good minutes against a very good Cincinnati front court is promising, and he really looked the part. I don't know that we can pull the trigger there in Maine at 4K. Get some more news there, dig around some of the Georgia Tech message boards, but he's certainly on my radar and somebody that I'm keeping a close eye on, because I think looking at the makeup of the current front court of Georgia Tech, they're going to need him sooner probably than later, right? You have Kyle Sturdivant there at 5'9". I think he's probably overpriced for what he is and what he does. Debo Coleman at 5'3". That's a price point that is good for him. You see he dropped all the way from almost 7K. That's a dynamic pricing that I'm talking about. He put up a 40, jumped to a 7K, put up 2, dropped down. Minutes, the big thing there for Coleman, as the Georgia Tech starting lineup, which currently looks like this: Reeves, Kelly, Amari Abram, Tejon Cloud, and then Debo Coleman coming off the bench, Ebenezer Duana, Ibrahim Sacco, the other freshman being Sacco. They did start Ndongo in that game. So it's something, like I said, we'll have to continue to watch. But Coleman coming off the bench is a bit of a wild card, because we're not sure if he's going to play 30 or if he's going to play 5. He is a hot hand type of player, and Stoudemire's made it pretty clear that he will continue to roll him out if he is positively contributing and making his shots. If he's not, then he's going to be sitting his ass on the bench. He's been pretty adamant and pretty clear about that during his pressers as well. Ndongo took the starting spot of Tafara Gapare in that last game, by the way. So we'll see how that shakes out. But we might be looking at Ndongo as a main team play here with limited information. Gapare has a questionable tag, but he was not injured as far as I know. So we'll see what happens with that. But typical Georgia Tech stuff, no matter who the coach is. All right, next game, Notre Dame versus South Carolina. Let's see. Carries a 133 over under. South Carolina favored by 7.5. Now, a lot to be made about how bad Louisville is, and everybody talking about they're going to be the worst team in the conference. Kind of to pump the brakes a little bit and be like, this Notre Dame team, they're not going to be much better. Tough loss to Western Carolina. We've been able to bet. We bet Western Carolina. That came through good. They got just absolutely demolished by Auburn. Won a tough OT game against Oklahoma State, which I was pretty impressed about. And then they also beat Maryland Eastern Shore in a game that they should obviously win. South Carolina, this is a tougher spot for them. They also have Miami early on December 2nd. So that's going to be a kind of an early slap in the face. They do have Marquette, Georgetown on the schedule as well, and an intriguing Citadel team that can score. So Notre Dame's going to be well battle tested here before conference play, and I'm not too much of a believer yet in Shrewsbury's roster. I am a believer in him as a coach. It's going to take him some time with this roster, though. Right now, we have a really condensed group of players. Starters, Marcus Burton, Julian Roper, Tay Davis, Matt Zona, and then J.R. Konesia. Kerry Booth off the bench, Braden Shrewsbury, and Logan Imes, and Keba Njai. Keba Njai, who missed the first 4 or 5 games of the season, made his season debut off the bench, played 15 minutes. So that gives them another piece to use on this roster because they are fairly shorthanded overall. I still think Marcus Burton is an elite GBP play. Is he Marcus Howard? No, but his usage and his shot rates are going to be fantastically high throughout the season. He's going to be relied upon to take a lot of volume. Right now, he's the 3rd highest usage rate in the country at 37.8%, 2nd highest shot rate in the country at 40%. But he does have a 25.1% assist rate, and he does have a 5.5 fouls drawn per 40 rate. So he is doing a lot of other things as well. 91% free throw shooter at games that are close. You want the ball in his hands. You want him on his roster because he's going to get a ton of freebies at the free throw line, probably going to make all of them. He hasn't been particularly great. The price tag on him went up to almost $9K. He's been, fairly middling, 22, 23, 24 fantasy points. Got back above 30 on that last game. 7.7 is a very nice and tasty price. I think he does make sense here. We're not quite into the posh play of the days yet. That starts December 1st. But Burton is a very big candidate to be that at this price of 7.7. I do not foresee him having much ownership, but I do like him a lot in this spot, and I think against South Carolina he can do some damage. Kerry Booth has been fantastic, not so fantastic in his game against Auburn, but he's been a pretty strong piece off the bench. Worry about Keba Njai being, available now, as that probably cuts into his time. As I said, Njai played 15 minutes in his first game. He's only 3-3. If he were to creep into the starting lineup at 3-3, I think he is viable. But South Carolina does have some physicality. Might limit him a little bit, but maybe start over somebody like Matt Zona, who really isn't very good at basketball. And I could see Keba being somewhat viable at 3-3, and obviously doesn't have to do a lot. If he can get 20, 22 minutes, he can pay that off. Shrewsbury, the son of Coach Shrewsbury, they're at 4.6. I think he's in play for GBPs. Played 30 minutes against OK State in the overtime game. Played 30 minutes against Auburn. He is somebody capable of scoring if the offense gets in a rut or Burton's just not effective, or say the defense is just wrapping him up. Shrewsbury can come in and start chucking away. It'll be interesting to see if he can add anything else besides that, but right now he is a volume scorer that can come in and fill it up quickly. Has a shot rate of over 20%, has taken 33s already through their first 5 games. And he started a couple early in the season as well. You still got my man Tay Davis, who transferred from Seton Hall. I really like his upside for the future, but at 5K, I'm a little bit, obviously not interested there at that price. Had he been 3.9, I think we could talk about it, but certainly not there with him yet. Not on Julian Roper either. Roper has had pretty much the Oklahoma State game, he looked great, but he's been just kind of a middling role player at best for the course of his career. I think we would have to see him at 4.5 before I really seriously considered using him. On the South Carolina side, they got us. South Carolina, going up against DePaul, any team against DePaul, I'm just going to be stacking. And it worked really well the other night with NIU, right? Really well. Didn't work so well with South Carolina. Luckily, we still escaped that slate with a real good, night. But BJ Mack, super foul trouble, only managed 16 minutes against DePaul. Total bust. Bounces back against Grand Canyon, 27 real points, 37 fantasy points. He did have major foul trouble, though, and that is the big problem with BJ Mack. He could absolutely torture this Notre Dame front court, but he has to be able to stay on the court. If we can get him closer to 30 minutes or above, he is certainly looking at 40-plus fantasy points in this matchup. I can't guarantee that, though, because he can't seem to stop fouling, and it's an alarming rate, and it's costing him a lot of minutes in the first half. Right now, he's drawing 6 fouls per 40, has a 5 fouls per 40 rate, 39% three-point shooter on 23 attempts, 32% shot rate, 29% usage rate, and an offensive rebounding rate of 9.6%. So I like BJ Mack a lot. Using him in my main against DePaul may have scorched me for the short term of using him again, but I would have to encourage at least some exposure in this spot. The guards, and then no other forward on this team is relevant for DFS purposes. They just rotate through, Josh Gray, big-time rebounder, shows upside there, but not a consistent option. Benjamin Verdonk, not a DFS option. And then Stephen Clark, who transferred in, he's just really not been much of anything. He's clearly struggling to assimilate to this offense or this program in general. Guards, they have a myriad. They have Jacoby Wright at 4'9", who has been solid in the past. Miles Stute, who is interesting at 5'8". Michi Johnson at 6K, and Talon Cooper, the Minnesota transfer, at 6'2". Cooper is one of those guys, and he's done it the last 2 seasons. He can get up to 35. He can go down to 5. 6'2" is a nice price for him. Looking at his rates, he's not the highest volume guy, but he does have a 31% assist rate, which is top 90 in the country. He is making 43% of his threes, and he's been overall fairly efficient running this offense when he's been asked to. I don't love him the most, but I think he's okay if you do want to use him. He's behind Michi Johnson for me, who's 6K. Michi, a much higher volume guy, 29% shot rate, 29% usage rate, shooting just 27% from long range, but he is taking volume right there along with Talon Cooper and Miles Stute, and also drawing almost 7 fouls per 40. Michi has developed quite well and become a go-to guy here. The problem with him is he's kind of the opposite in Cooper. He's not very efficient, needs to chuck and get that volume to get there, but he's certainly interesting there at 6K. Miles Stute was one of the guys I was big on against DePaul. He played 30 minutes against them. Price of 5.3. Should have panned out, but he only had 15. Just wasn't aggressive. Couldn't get much going. He is there at 5'8". Logs aren't going to look particularly sexy, but he is playing a good chunk of minutes, and he's out there. And this is a matchup in Notre Dame. He can certainly do some things. He is shooting 50% from long range on 20 attempts, has a shot rate of 21%, and I definitely think sub 6K at least puts him in the conversation here. But we're not stacking South Carolina like we were against DePaul, but I don't mind coming away with at least one of their guards here if you're not playing Mac. And then Jacoby Wright, like I said, playing big minutes off the bench, 4'9". I'd like to see him a little bit cheaper. I don't know that he has the 4X at this price here with the current makeup of the roster. But if any injuries happen or anybody has to, miss time, Wright's a prime candidate to blow up. He did so last year whenever he had to fill in for other injured players. Still no Briba Dibba, who transferred over from Coastal a couple of years ago. The Achilles giving him a lot of trouble from last year. Hasn't fully missed the entire season. Hasn't been able to get going. He's there at 3K. I don't know that he'll ever be the same, but at Coastal, he was a habitual double-double and triple-double threat for what it's worth. And then at 3-4, you have Zachary Davis, a player with upside, needs minutes. There are a ton of guys ahead of him, so I don't know that we'll get the minutes for him, but you saw in the first blowout game, 22 minutes, 20 fantasy points. He did have 15 against DePaul as well in 19 minutes because of all that foul trouble that was taking place. South Carolina had to play a little smaller. So I don't hate Davis as a GPP look. You have several in this game that you can look at, very few for main lineup. Big decision point being, do you want to pay that 7-1 for BJ Mack in an absolute nut DVP spot? Or do you want to just move on to the Notre Dame side? Maybe you take Burton, or maybe you go down to a guy like Shrewsbury, Kebanjai, maybe one of those values. But I do think this is kind of a sneakier game that people will be off, and there's certainly going to be something that happens that ends up with one of these guys being optimal. Feel pretty confident about that. All right, next game, Missouri versus Pittsburgh. 146 total. Pittsburgh 6.5-point favorites versus Missouri. My. That is, what have we gotten to here with Pittsburgh? Jeff Capel, man, feeling himself after last year's 24-win season, winning a couple games in the tournament. Capel, who was on the hot seat there, might he be turning this Pittsburgh program around out to a 5-1 start? They did lose a game to Florida. They weren't very competitive in that one. Florida looks awesome, by the way. Did beat a really bad Oregon State team, a Jacksonville team, a Florida Gulf State team, and Gulf Coast, Binghamton, and North Carolina A&T. So pumping the brakes a little bit here. Pittsburgh hasn't really played anyone, and the one game they did play, they gave up almost 90 to Florida. So you'll have to forgive me for not thinking there's some hugely competitive, great team. And I do think there's betting opportunities here for Missouri because 6.5 points does feel like a lot. Granted, they are at home. So far, Pittsburgh's been an elite rebounding team. They have the number one defensive rebounding efficiency in the country. Offensive rebounding percentage is top 10. They're playing at the 60th fastest tempo, and they have a defensive efficiency in the top 40, offensive efficiency in the top 60. They're definitely playing well under Capel right now, and they're playing who's in front of them. They've been able to retool their roster a little bit. Ish Leggett, who transferred over, he's been great. He was with Rhode Island for a few years. So far, 26% shot rate, 25% usage rate, making about 37% of his threes, filling in that high usage guard, lead guard role that has been on the Pittsburgh roster the last few years. Obviously, last year was Jamarius Burton. We were able to rely on him in that role. In years past, Femi Odekale was in that role. We've had some pretty damn good success using those guards. Xavier Johnson was there at a time. Ithiel Horton. So they've had some pretty big names that have come through, but this happens to be the year for Ish Leggett. They have the freshman Carlton Carrington, who started real hot. Kind of fooled people a little bit. He's good, and he's put up some nice numbers, but the price tag, had risen to over $8K, and it felt a little bit uncomfortable for me to use him. Did kind of underperform there against Oregon State. He does have fantastic numbers. He is a threat, not a real threat to triple-double, but he's got that 15, 7, and 8 capability where you're like, yeah, he's flirting with a triple-double. 35% assist rate, which is top 50 in the country. Has a 17% combined rebounding rate, which is solid for his size. 44% three-point shooter on 37 attempts. 21% shot rate, 21% usage rate. So I get it. He's been good. He's just not my priority play when I'm looking at Pittsburgh, and he probably won't be unless his price kind of drops. I just don't foresee paying up for him when Leggett's there for only a few hundred more. The more dominant alpha of the two does just as much in those other categories. Leggett's rebounding like an absolute monster right now. I don't know where Leggett gets off rebounding like this, but I like it so far. He's got a career high in combined rebounding rate, individual defensive and offensive rebounding rate. Throughout the course of his career, he's had about a 12% combined rebounding rate. Right now, he's got a 23%. I don't know if that continues as they see better teams. The Florida game, he still had 9 rebounds for what it's worth, and that was their toughest opponent yet, and he had 19 real. So Ish Leggett is probably looking like the real deal right now. Still like Blake Hinson a lot. His price is usually affordable in this low 7K range, 7.3. He doesn't seem to maybe have the upside that you'd love. He does put up from time to time these big 40-point games, but he's kind of more of that safer option. You're going to get a floor of 25 with him, and sometimes that safety kind of feels nice, when there's busts abound. So he's playing big minutes as well, and he's taking a ton of shots, 17, 15, 16, 15, 14. Where he's kind of fallen off is his rebound because Leggett's been such a psycho on the rebounding end. It's hurt Hinson. Carrington has been rebounding pretty well, which is also cutting into it. And then you've got guys like Federico, obviously as a big man, he's getting rebounds. And then Guillermo Diaz-Graham, who is just, a god, deserves more minutes. Start him, play him, 35 minutes. Come on, Jeff. And he's rebounding, like a monster. So there's a lot of good rebounders. Obviously, they're not the number one rebounding team in the country for no reason, statistically speaking. So there's a lot to like on this roster, and especially going up against a Missouri team that, like I said, I think Missouri can cover, but I do think Pittsburgh is probably the better roster at this moment. Other options outside of the Hinson, Carrington, Leggett trio, we have Guillermo Diaz-Graham at 5.7. He's got the upside there. That price has dropped after 2 straight kind of down games for him. He put up that 50, against Jacksonville. High usage rate, 25%. He just doesn't start, Started the last 3 games in the tournament last year, and it seemed like, this kid's going to be a monster, but they're not starting him. It would be nice for him to start. I just don't know. They like what they get out of Federico as far as a defensive option. Graham's going to be looking for a shot. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that first unit, so it does make sense to use him in that second unit, but he's just not getting enough minutes. I would like to see that flip. Maybe Federico starts but plays like 15 to 20. Graham comes off the bench but plays 25 to 26, something like that. So hard to play them. Federico's fine at 5.5 if you do want to get there. He's kind of a last man in type of play. Probably going to coast over 20 fantasy points. Doesn't need to do much more than that to pay off. And then you have Zach Austin. The high point transfer, had his best game in a Pittsburgh uni against Oregon State. He was relatively mediocre in his first 3 games, but he scored 25 plus fantasy points in 3 straight. He's 6'6", though. I'd rather just play like Hinson. I'd rather just play Ish Leggett. But there's a lot to like on this Pittsburgh team. And I'm going to be looking at props. I'm going to be doing some prop shopping in this game because I think we're going to have some nice rebounding and PRA numbers. So I will make sure those are in the tracker tomorrow on ftnbets.com, but I'll also post those in the Discord. Our man, the myth, the legend, Mike Randall, is on articles on Tuesday, so I will not be posting an article there. He will handle it. I will have a player pool, a core, and any applicable prize picks and prop bets in the Discord. And, of course, you're watching the show right now, so you're getting all the game-by-game analysis that you need to smack the hell out of your opponents. All right, on the Missouri side, it's all about Noah Carter. I am fully in on Noah Carter this year and made that clear from day one. The Memphis game, and it's like we're always so early on guys, man. Like Achilles heel is being early on a guy. Like Dame Adokun of Loyola, right? Like that was another one. It's like, why the hell are we playing him? Then he starts finally and rattles off a 40. Like, these guys, we know what we're talking about here. We're having a little bit of weirdness there, and guys are coming through now though. Noah Carter, in the first game of the season that we used him, that he was on a slate, that is, against Memphis, 20 points. I know that was a rough one, but he shot 4 of 12 and he played 33 minutes. So say what you will about that. You're going to have those nights where guys just don't score. He followed that up with a 40. Then he followed that up with a 32, had a down game in a weird loss to Jacksonville State. Then he popped off 32. Then he just dropped a 37 against Loyola Maryland. And I think these 17 point, 7 rebound, 3 assist type games are just going to be like the hallmark of Noah Carter. I do not mind paying 7.7 for him. I think he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, and going up against a Pittsburgh team that may or may not be for real on defense, he's just going to be, relied upon to do a lot of damage. His rates in these games, he's over 25, 30%, and he's just doing a lot. The rest of Missouri, you can really kind of just gloss over. They're all really cheap, I know. But outside of Carter and maybe Sean East, whose price has ballooned to 6.5, there's not a lot of guys you can count on for consistency. Now, I love Sean East. He's been around the collegiate game for years when it was D1, then he was at the JUCO level, and now he's back. He showed those flashes. You knew last year that he was fully capable of running a team and playing D1 basketball, and they're giving him more minutes this year, and I'm super jacked about it. We may have missed the boat there with this dynamic pricing, which, like I said, it's great, but we also end up, only having Sean East available to us at 5K for one game. Now he's pushing 6.5, 7K. It is a hard price to get to, but he's absolutely worth it in this matchup against Pittsburgh because, again, he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, and I think it becomes a situation where Carter and East are just doing all the work. If they get down early, those are going to be the 2 guys that bring them back. If they're in the lead, those are going to be the 2 guys that are maintaining it. It's not going to be Connor Vanover, who still can't defend the pick and roll. No thanks. Just go ahead and have a seat, Connor. Nick Honor, who I never really truly believe in. I know Honor's had some pretty solid games lately, and at 5.5, I could foresee people or the industry maybe having him rostered in droves, meaning 15 to 30%, which is kind of the magic number we see on a lot of players now with minimal places posting ownership projections. But I'm not going to be on Nick Honor. It's just one of those, I always preach keep a short memory in DFS, but that's when it's a good play that had a bad game. We'll go back to him. Not a player that has underperformed every single year for the last 3 years since he left Fordham. So that's not really the same thing. I would almost rather just play Caleb Grill at 4.9, who I don't have any interest in at all. Did play 27 minutes in that last game. Again, there's a lot of options. Missouri does have a somewhat deep bench with these various guards. They'll play Grill, they'll play Honor. Tamar Bates is in the mix there. Aiden Shaw plays multiple positions. They do have Anthony Robinson, who played 22 minutes off the bench, the freshman. So they've got a bunch of different options that will come in. It's almost a hot hand situation there, but I feel pretty confident that Easton Carter are going to be playing 30-plus minutes with regularity. Speaking of Aiden Shaw at 4.8, he really, really came on the scene in their first game there with that massive 31 fantasy point game, but he's fallen back down to earth almost predictably there. He's not anywhere near consistent, but he is a big time shot blocker. As his price dips here below 5K like it is, he's a nice little GPP look. The front court of Pittsburgh and their rebounding ability, Shaw's going to be needed. The only main concern there is that Shaw's going to be somebody who maybe gets into some foul trouble in a competitive game like this. So he's not a main team look whatsoever. And I know so far through these first 4 games, we've talked about a lot of kind of upper mid-range price guys, not as many, super big pay-ups or super values, although we do have a couple we're speculating on, right? Like on Georgia Tech, we got Ndongo. On South Carolina, we have a couple of these cheapies, maybe like a Zach Davis. There are some available to us, but I'm certainly living in that mid-range, which is going to be tough for me because PJ Hall has a fantastic paced up-tempo game against Alabama. My man Alan Flanagan is absolutely murdering, and Norchad Omier is just and he's typically an auto play for me every week, and he has a matchup where Trey Mitchell is probably going to be guarding him a lot. So I love the pay-ups in this slate, those 3 especially. But I am living in that mid-range so far. All right, moving on, we have Miami versus Kentucky. This is a pretty intriguing one here. Miami plus 5.5. I don't know how we don't slap Miami plus 5.5, sprinkle the money line, right? This is Miami, off of a deep tournament run, veteran group. They did lose 2 key pieces, but replaced Jordan Miller with Matthew Cleveland, who's basically the same player. Couldn't be more perfect. You've got Wooga Poplar in the midst of a breakout season. You've got Bensley Joseph in the midst of a semi-breakout season. Kentucky's young. They got Antonio Reeves, I know. Trey Mitchell's undersized, having to guard centers for now. Man, I don't know how. I'm either gonna lose a lot of money on Miami in this one betting, or I'm gonna be buying another washer and dryer just because. Total of 164. We like that. Lots to like in this game. Every time Miami's on the slate, I'm looking to stack them because our man Jim Larinaga, he takes care of us. He knows what we want. We want a short bench. We want starters playing 35-plus minutes, and he is going to give it to us. Nigel Pack, Norchad Omier, Bensley Joseph, Matthew Cleveland, and Wooga Poplar. Those 5 starters are typically going to play above 30 minutes, maybe 26 to 29, but we'll call it 30. As the bench goes, it's same situation as last year, very minimal contributions. They have the freshman Kaishan George, who I do think can develop quickly. They do have the young sophomore AJ Casey, and then Christian Watson, another youngster, and a couple of freshmen in Michael Onwako and Ja'Kai Robinson. So it's just going to be the starters that you focus on for Miami usually. Prices are where you would expect on all of them. Norchad Omier, the most expensive at 9.1. Again, this is a great spot against Kentucky. Now, are the refs going to be are they going to be like the Duke style refs? Are they going to be calling fouls just because, or are they going to call a fair one? Are we going to get ticky-tack fouls on Omier, or are they going to let him play? And I that's the main worry for me, is if they're going to allow them to play. Looking at it Trey Mitchell, like I said, he had to guard Hunter Dickinson a lot in that Kansas game, and we know that was the big one where Dickinson delivered 27 and 21 rebounds for us. That was a great one. There hasn't been too many other opportunities for them or other bigs to play them. Obinna and Achille Killen for Marshall put up 22 and 6. Nate Martin, their 4, had 10 rebounds. So we're, to a lesser scale, we're still seeing when they play competition that is at least decent, big time performances. They had to go to overtime at Rupp to beat a St. Joe's team that doesn't really have the bigs to challenge them. But Eric Reynolds was just, man, what a game. He had 28 actual points, knocked down 6 triples. He was just phenomenal. Their center, Rasheer Fleming, did have 9 rebounds. Didn't do a whole lot else, but he was getting rebounds and kicking it out. And guys like Cam Brown, Eric Reynolds, and Xavier Brown were just knocking down triple after triple. So that was interesting to see in that particular game. So this is why we like Norchad Omier. And if we can find enough value or sacrifice some of this elite mid-tier plays that we're kind of, seeing everywhere, Omier should have a big game. But foul trouble could absolutely ruin that. Does it worry me? Yes. Do I think the refs could potentially, get a little excited in the moment and call a dumbass foul on him? Yes. Do I think he will lose minutes because of it? Yes. So he's probably GPP category responsibly. I want to just throw him in there and say, like, we're getting 5X, let's roll. Because he should have 15 rebounds against this Kentucky team. He should have 20 real points. If we can get 35 minutes out of Norchad, he's breaking the slate. If we can get 30 minutes out of Norchad, probably not quite breaking the slate, but he's doing enough damage that his faders are definitely feeling it. Anything below 30 minutes, and we're starting to talk, about hurt lineups, sub 40 fantasy points, sub 35 fantasy points, like real scary territory here. So tread lightly there because of price and what I think could happen with fouls. I hate having to worry about that, but we've played this since, draft street days, and many of us been watching college basketball since we were in diapers. This is just the nature of the game. It's just not going to change until we get 6 fouls, which, outside of the NIT is just probably not going to happen. Matthew Cleveland at 7.5, as I mentioned, the absolute perfect replacement for Jordan Miller. Plays very similar. I do think at 7.5, that's a really nice bounce back spot. Again, with this pricing the way it is, he's had 2 sub 30 fantasy point performances, which has brought his price down over the last 4 from 9.1 to 7.5. Really like Matthew Cleveland in this spot. Now, we saw in the St. Joe's game, 3-point shooters were just absolutely murdering Kentucky, and they were hot. The 3-point shooting for Miami is good, not that hot, but it's very good. How good is it? Well, they're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. So I don't mean to mislead you there, but looking at the way St. Joe's played them, we could see a situation where if Omier is hamstrung by fouls, Nigel Pack, who's shooting 40% from long range, Matthew Cleveland, who's shooting 50% from long range, Bensley Joseph, who's shooting 56% from long range, or Nigel Pack, who's shooting 40% from long range. 60% for Wooga Poplar is 8th best in the country. So you got 4 different players above 40%. Really strong shooting. And it's on volume. 14 attempts for Cleveland, 18 for Joseph, 32 for Poplar, and 28 for Pack. Poplar's taken 32 triples and made 19. Like, holy shit. And Norchad Omier has made 30%, 3 of 10. So, their starting 5 is just drilling threes. There's reason to love Miami in this spot against Kentucky. They're the veteran group. They have them outmatched in the post. They have them outmatched in 3-point efficiency. I don't know how we get away from using at least one Miami. We don't have to stack them like we usually do when they're on the slate, although I think we could. If you're not playing Omier, you could easily feel good about Poplar-Cleveland duo, Pack and Poplar, Joseph and Poplar. Notice I'm mentioning Poplar every time. I do think he's a borderline core play at 7-1. I know it's a little bit of a higher price, but he's just been so steady. He's rebounding at a very, very good rate. Over 20% combined, 26% shot rate. Just Poplar's the guy that I think excels here, especially if Norchad ends up having to play less minutes or he picks up that first ticky-tack foul and they need a little bit of help there. I think Poplar becomes just an egregiously amazing play to the point where people fading him are questioning their whole life. I do think Poplar could put up a huge score here against this Kentucky team. And I don't think people recognize just how good of a season he's already had, and it's only going to get better from here. Probably have the least trust in Bensley Joseph, especially after the down game against Kansas State. It's to be expected. He is the fifth Beatle, if you will, in that starting lineup. He's been absolutely phenomenal, but 6'3" is a lot of salary to dedicate. He's going to play a lot of minutes, but he's obviously one of the lower options in their starting lineup and in the pecking order. If he gets hot, they'll go to him, but they're not starting with him, and that's just when you're looking at a 6'3", up to Nigel Pack at 6'9", up to Wooga Poplar at 7'1". We're talking about less than 1K. Just find that 800 to go to Wooga Poplar, because at least we know he's going to be safe for 28 to 29 fantasy points with the option for more. Joseph might end up outscoring him from an X value marker, and that's great, but there's just a lot more risk there. We're trying to mitigate that risk as much as we can right now, especially on these slates where points are coming at a premium. Pack, didn't mention him as much at 6'9", but he's always in play. He's a safe one too, right? Like, he's very rarely going to give you less than 25 fantasy points, generally going to be around 30, not much more over that. But this one, potential to maybe go to a little bit of overtime, maybe a close one down the stretch, free throws racking up. Like, Pack, we know he thrives in this. Like last year when they went out and got him, right, paid all that money to get him under contract, he kind of had a decent season, but I think most people are like, what did they really pay for? And then he answered all of those questions at the tournament, right? So he's a really good player to have on your team when you're facing a team like Kentucky and you're going to be going into a situation that's hostile. Maybe Bensley Joseph gets lost in the moment. Maybe Poplar struggles, although I doubt it. Pack is somebody that you can rely on and has been there and is very good and will certainly not shrink in that moment at all. So I'm on board with using him as well. Big decision maker there. As I see lineups throughout the day, or people ask me, to rank Miami, because I know that's going to be coming. I really don't mind using any of them, but if I have to rank in a priority order, it starts with Poplar, followed by Cleveland, then Norchad, then Pack, then Joseph. Norchad would be number one if I didn't have to worry about fouls. Like if you choose not to worry about fouls and you're just going to say best matchup, best player on the court, let the chips fall how they may, then Norchad Omier is the priority. But I'm just really worried. I'm really worried about him getting screwed over by the refs, especially if they're like Duke's refs. And I know Duke doesn't have refs, but when they get into the Cameron Indoor, they start blowing the whistle on their opponents there a little bit more than they probably should. On the Kentucky side, Trey Mitchell playing a ton of minutes at the 5, out of position. He's been great. He's been playing really well. It's caused his price to balloon up to 8.2. Don't really love him there. I do think, there's potential for him also to get into foul trouble. One thing Norchad does well, in addition to him picking up fouls, is he usually takes his opponent down with him. So I could see Trey Mitchell kind of struggle in this matchup, at least, to stay on the floor. He has taken 30 shots in the past 2 games there against St. Joe's and Marshall, so he's really playing well. Kentucky is just generating a ton of offense. They've been able to support, like if you would have been mini stacking Kentucky over the last few games, you're cashing everything. They're, the main worry for me with Kentucky is usually they have too many mouths to feed. There's a pecking order here. How is this going to work out? But they're having multiple guys go off. Rob Dillingham hasn't been below 30 fantasy points since, early November, just 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's been phenomenal off the bench, probably one of the best 6-mans in the country. Antonio Reeves, he's been over 30-plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. Again, you're stacking these guys and you're getting 30-plus out of all of them. Reed Shepherd even put up a 30. He's 2 games off of his 50. It's just been ridiculous. The only one that really hasn't been panning out is the one that most people thought would be an immediate stud, and that's Justin Edwards. He's been pretty slow. I think going from a high usage, you're the man role in high school to, hey, you're 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th on the pecking order. That can be tough on a guy. And certainly struggling with that. He is priced at only 6'1", prime GPP candidate to break out, because DJ Wagner rather, was a kind of struggling in the same way that Edwards was, but you saw him bounce back or kind of dig down and finally unearth that upside we know he has against St. Joe's. 36 minutes, 22 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists, followed that up with 28 points, 1 rebound, 5 assists, back-to-back games over 35 fantasy points. So Wagner's starting to figure it out quickly. 6'8", I probably won't dedicate that salary to him because I still think, hey, it's Miami, defense is tough. There's going to be some growing pains for these youngsters, but GPP-wise, Edwards and Wagner do carry a ton of upside. Wagner, because he's shown it. Edwards hasn't shown it at the collegiate level yet, but a kid like that is liable to go off at any time. I would love to write off Rob Dillingham as hey, we're not paying almost $8K for a bench piece, but Jesus, he is going straight to the NBA after this season. I have no doubt about that. 16-5-8 against Marshall, 13-5-6 against St. Joe's, 24-7 against Stonehill, 18-2-3 against Kansas, 12-5-4 against Texas A&M. Just consistently contributing across the board. The first game against New Mexico State, 17-5-3. He is just doing it, man. I am a really big fan of Rob Dillingham. He is just phenomenal. The way he plays and how just comfortable he looks. Leads the team in usage at 28.5%, leads the team in shot rate at 27.7%, leads the team in assist rate at 37.9%, which is top 25, and he leads the team in steals rate at 3.5%. Actually, I take it back. Second on steals rate at 3.5%, shooting 50% from long range on 28 attempts. They do have the other freshman, Reed Shepherd. His dad is a legend in the program, shooting 67% on 21 attempts. That's number 1 in the country, in case you were wondering. So 3-point shooting for Kentucky, very good too. This game could turn into a 3-point shootout real quick. We might have the back and forth, tennis, ping pong, whoa, blink and you miss it. Do we need to stack this game? I think we might have to, but pricing won't allow you to just mindlessly click in 3 or 4 of them. You're going to have to get a little bit creative. You may have to take Edwards. You may have to take a Bensley Joseph to make it work. You're not getting big discounts here. You're going to have to sacrifice some things to make it work. So I'm really happy that you can't just stack it up. But if you throw away a couple of spots, what I mean by that is just, some sub 4 or 5 punts who maybe 50-50 shot if they actually pan out to get yourself to 4 spots in this game, it could really pan out, especially if it goes to overtime or is close throughout, which it obviously will be. Priority-wise for me from the Kentucky side, I think Reeves at 7-2, he gets forgot about a lot, but in games where they'll need a bucket or they need a leader, it's clearly going to be him. So he's number 1 on my list there at that 7-2 price point. Number 2 would be Dillingham, because I don't know. I can't seem to fathom him stopping at this point. He just looks like the best player in the court every game. 3rd would be Wagner, 4th Mitchell, then Edwards, and then we'd be talking about Shepherd. Shepherd's not really a play at 7K. He's likely going to play low to mid-20s minutes, but he can't continue to put up these big numbers at 7K, especially as they're playing better opponents such as Miami. If Mitchell were to get into foul trouble, if Dillingham was ineffective, Shepherd has to come out there and generate some offense, then sure, but we're paying 7K for him seems pretty lousy of a move to me. You do have Adu Tiaro there at 5'6" as a cheaper option as well, playing right around 25 minutes a game. He has been producing as well. Kentucky's they're scoring at such an astronomical rate. They're putting up these huge totals. They scored 101 against Stonehill. They scored 96 against St. Joe's. 84 in the loss to Kansas, 81 against Commerce, 118 against Marshall, 86 against New Mexico State. They're just scoring so much that all of these guys are panning out. And Right now, Ken Palm has an 85-79 in favor of Kentucky, by the way, so scoring another 80. I think Miami wins, or at least covers, but there's going to be a lot of points scored here. So take your pick and how you want to attack this one, but make sure you come away with a minimum of 1, and if your lineup allows it, 2. I think the preferred build would be 1 Miami, 1 Kentucky, if you can get there. All right, next game on the slate, NC State versus Ole Miss. We got our old friend Flanny, Alan Flanagan, the no braids Flanny, you may remember from a couple years ago, one of the deadliest players on the court, much better than braids Flanny. Ole Miss is a 1-point favorite, 146.5 total. We're betting NC State in this one, by the way. We are taking the Wolfpack money line all day long. I like the Wolfpack to win this game, but I got to mention Flanny, who was playing out of position for years at Auburn, caused him to turn the ball over a lot. He played on a team with a bunch of me-first guards, right? Like, Flanny just didn't fit in there. He transfers for his last season to Ole Miss, and he has finally got the opportunity to operate as an alpha, and he's absolutely crushing. Now, it would be hypocritical for me to say, Brooks Barnheiser is a non-con hero, and a couple of these other players, like, watch out because they're beating up on lesser tier competition, so we can't get too excited about it. And then sit here and tell you, like, Flanagan is a god. He is the best player in the world. He's going to be so good, in the SEC, because they've played Alabama State, Eastern Washington, Detroit, Sam Houston, and Temple. Temple was their hardest game, and they came away with a 1-point win against Temple, and he absolutely dominated them. So this is going to be this stretch of games coming up will be an actual barometer for where Flanagan actually stands in this new role. NC State's a very tough opponent. Memphis is going to be a very tough opponent, which they're playing on Saturday. They have a gimme against Mount St. Mary's. Then they play a tough UCF team, then a California team with talent, and then they have the SEC play starting January 6th with Tennessee. So a couple of games here to see really where this team stands. But right now, Flanny, just let me enjoy the moment because he has been fucking awesome. 32% usage rate, 32% shot rate, both of those top 60 in the country. Combined rebounding rate of almost 27%, 4% block rate, 3% steal rate, drawing almost 8 fouls per 40. Not the biggest three-point shooter, but he has made 4 of 8 so far for 50%. They have some more volume three-point shooters on the team in Jalen Murray and Matthew Morrell. So Flanny operates and actually runs as kind of a big guard. He does run the offense quite a bit. That's something that they tried at Auburn. It didn't work as well because he did turn it over, but also because he couldn't get into the offense with how selfish some of the guards he played with. Playing with TJ Caldwell, Austin Nunez, Jalen Murray, some of these other guys, they're not as selfish. He's able to operate as the alpha. They know they can win games and play well with him in that spot, and they're allowing him to have the ball in his hands a lot. Matthew Morrell was a very high usage player last year and throughout his time at Ole Miss, and he hasn't necessarily taken a back seat, but he's transformed his role a little bit and allowing Flanny to dominate. 9K is a very high price to pay. Last year it's like at 4.5, like, hey, can we use Flanny? So going straight to 9K, I'll get a GPP share out there, but I'm not going to pay the 9K price tag for him, but I always love Flanny. Like I said, I will have exposure, but playing him in your main lineup, that's going to be relatively tough. Now, Ole Miss, they're coached by, not a disgraced Chris Beard, but somebody who has to repair his image and really, if he can do a good job and turn Ole Miss into a competitive team that makes the postseason, whether it's the NIT or the tournament, I think it starts to heal. They have 2 players who haven't been able to get their waivers yet, Mo Cisse and Brandon Murray, multi-time non-grad transfers. So this roster packs a lot of punch. And they can be relatively strong if they have their entire group, which will only enhance Flanagan's game. Now, if we're not paying 9K for Flanny, we have Morrell, who still has a high shot rate. Again, he's transforming his game a little bit. Morrell was the main option last year, and defenses knew that. So once I got into SEC play, he got handcuffed a lot. And you're seeing so far being able to operate off Flanagan, he has been more efficient and just producing a more consistent rate. So at 6'6", Morel actually makes a lot of sense because I do think he's going to threaten to score 30-plus fantasy points here with the NC State defense focused on Flanagan. But I do think this Wolfpack perimeter and wing defense is going to be a problem all season long. So Morel's not necessarily a priority, but if you get there at 6'6", and that's a last spot or two for you, I'm perfectly happy and content with using him there. Jalen Murray, third on the team in shot rate at 23%, has a usage rate of 24%, sub 6 foot point guard. He was on St. Peter's for a couple of seasons. He was a little used freshman during their tournament run. He did get some minutes there and some experience there before Holloway left. So far, he was really good last year for St. Peter's, had the number 1 shot rate in all of the conference, 11th best shot rate in all the country. So somebody who can definitely score and gives Ole Miss another look, another option to run some 3-guard lineups and kind of just keep the defense on its toes there. TJ Caldwell, he showed flashes as a freshman, has come out and played quite well here as kind of a 4th option, if you will, playing over 25 minutes per game. He did have a really, really solid role last year, and it's kind of developed into a 3-point gunner type role, shooting 47% on 15 attempts through 5 games. Last year, he took 68 attempts, and he's already up to 15, so he's going to get a lot more there. I don't think he's going to give us a lot of other stats necessarily. The price on him is right at 4K. So all we really need him to do is hit a couple of his shots, score, 12 to 14 real, and feel pretty good about him. Like I said, he doesn't offer us a lot else, but at 4K, I think he can put 4X to the bank here for us and be a value that we can rely on. He isn't a starter, so that's an important distinction to make. I don't want you to, be waiting for the starters to come out here and be like, Caldwell's not starting. What do we do? Panic. He's not a starter, but he is playing roughly 25, 26 minutes per game, and he's played over 30 in 3 of their games so far this year. So important distinction to make, but just know he is in this rotation safely. Jermaine Brakefield, who has taken a step back so far, at least in terms of offensive production and fantasy production. He and Morel last year were kind of the duo, still playing a lot of minutes, rebounding well, but the scoring's just not there for Brakefield. 6'3", his price is going to have to come down before we really start to consider using him again. They do have Jamarian Sharp, who transferred in. It was hit or miss if he would be available waivers-wise, but he did get his waiver after transferring over from Western Kentucky. High offensive rebounding rate of 12.6%, 6th best block rate in the country. He was actually last year at Western Kentucky, had the number 1 block rate in the country, a big-time rim protector. He is almost 7'6", George Mirasan, Manute Bowl size there, big-time rim protector. Not the fastest guy in the court or the most agile, but you get him under the rack and watch him work. He'll rack up blocks in a hurry. He already has multiple blocks in every single game this season, a 4, a 3, some big-time production, averaging almost 3 blocks per game. So not a big-time producer of other stats, but at 5'4", I think he can be used for GBPs. The likelihood of him not getting into foul trouble against this NC State front court, especially with Burns, is very low. I think he's probably going to end up on the bench with 2 early fouls. So keep that in mind while you're looking to possibly use him. Austin Nunez, who transferred in, is expected to be a contributor, but he's not kind of figured it out yet. You can safely avoid him at 3-2, at least right now. I would have thought his minutes would be higher, considering that Murray wasn't getting his waiver, but that has not worked out to his favor just yet. So TJ Caldwell at 4K, certainly main team viable because of his minutes off the bench. Otherwise, Morel makes a lot of sense, and Flanny as a GPP luxury type play, right? On the Wolfpack side, we got to start with DJ Burns. He's just so good. Price up to almost 8K now. That certainly gives me a little pause. But I still feel like if you're going with that balanced approach, he's just a great overall play. NC State under Keats playing at the 16th fastest tempo, top 70 defense, top 50 offense. They roll through their first 4 games, beat a Vanderbilt team that they should beat, but BYU, man, they're way better than I thought they were going to be this early. They end up beating NC State 95-86, but Burns 16 points, 7 rebounds, a couple steals, 4 assists. Casey Morcell scored 28 real. We'll talk about him in a second. Not using him. But Burns is just a really solid guy. 28 shots in his past 2 games. He's high usage, high rebounding rates. He's just really good, and they work the offense through him. He has a 20% assist rate, so he's one of those, passing bigs who can quarterback at the high post, top of the key, can take jumpers. I'm just a big fan of Burns. May not make sense to utilize him here at 8K, but again, we're looking for raw points. He almost kind of effortlessly puts up 30, 32 fantasy points, and that's going to put him at value. Might he get more? Absolutely, but Burns is just kind of a marquee play on most slates, and I do like him here against this Ole Miss team. The next tier of plays is at the guard spot, Jaden Taylor, who's transferred in, DJ Horn, who is another transfer from ASU, and then, of course, Casey Morcell, who's been there for a couple of years. Every time Morcell has a big game or you start to buy in on him and think, okay, I can finally use Casey Morcell, he ends up blanking hard. So we've seen, this is another one of those ones where, yes, I preach having a short memory, but this kid has done this to us for years now. I'm just not falling into that trap. He did take 17 shots against BYU, but, I'll let somebody else. If I lose to Casey Morcell, fine. I'd much rather play DJ Horn for $100 more. Horn's going to give us more defensive stats, stocks. He's a little bit more of a consistent option. I'm not supremely high on him, but he's absolutely in play. And then for, a couple hundred more than that, we get Jaden Taylor, who is contributing across multiple stats, and he's also scoring 15 points per game and playing really well. 25% usage rate, shooting 56% from long range on 18 attempts, 3.5% steal rate. Does have a little bit of a foul issue. He's a bit aggressive there on the perimeter, trying to make those big steals, but he's a very strong play against Ole Miss. I think with the Ole Miss guards, we will see turnover rates kind of spike there. I think that's just a natural part of what happens to Flanagan, and we've seen in the past from Moreau. This is a game, I'm never going to sit here and be like, let's project stats, steals. Let's predict 4 steals. Like, that's just probably not going to work out too well. But if ever there was a game where Taylor could continue this, crazy streak of two steals a game mark that he's running, this would be it. Like, I think we see another nice little 15, 5, and 2 type game, 2 steals, hits a couple threes at 6'4", just puts up another 30, 35 fantasy points. He's been really good. This has been probably the best out of all the transfers that NC State got in the offseason. Taylor's probably the best by far. You have Mo Diarra there. He's a fouling machine as well. He started the season out hot. Minutes have trickled down from there. He is not cheap enough at 5'4" to consider, so I'm out on him. You have Michael O'Connell, the transfer from Stanford, at 4'7". He's certainly in play, 20 to 25 minutes per game, low-end value. Really want to push you back towards the Dennis Parker play, which I know first half he picked up 2 fouls immediately, sent him to the bench, missed, I think he played like 3 minutes in the first half. Ends up playing nearly the entire second half, finishes with 19 minutes, 6 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 15 fantasy points. Now it's 3X at 5K, not the greatest, but it just shows you when he was on the court, he's making things happen. This kid is going to be very special. When they landed him, I thought, wow, that's a pretty nice get for Keats. Not enough people talking about it. I did think it would take time for him to develop, but he's been so damn good that he's forcing his way onto the court. He's forcing his way into bigger minutes, and I think that's going to continue. He's going to have to develop further as a scorer. He's not a starter yet, so be aware of that. But very active. His block rate %, steal rate 5%. He has made 37% of his 9 triples. I just really like Parker. There's a little bit of a probably disparity between his expected minutes or consistent minutes and his price right now. We're talking if he was 4-2, maybe I could really sell you on that a little bit more. At 5-2, you're probably going to have your guard up, and I totally understand that. But with that being said, there's a really good chance I end up just plugging Dennis Parker into my main lineup again. I'm stubborn, and when I have a play in my head and that I feel is going to contribute and is maybe to a detriment, I want to outsmart the field. But if Parker plays 25 to 30 minutes like he did against Vanderbilt, he's going to break the slate. And when I mean break the slate, he's not going to put up a 70, but at 5-2, he's going 6X. And I'm very confident in that against this Ole Miss team. So we just need him not to pick up those ticky-tack fouls. And generally, he's been pretty good about that. There were a lot of fouls. The refs called that BYU game super, super tight. I think in the first half, there were like 6 guys with 2 or more fouls. It got even more ridiculous from further on. But it's clear as day if Parker gets minutes, he's going to produce. So I don't think he stays in the 5K range for very long. I think by the time we get to ACC play, the dude's a 7K player. Maybe I'm a little too gung-ho, but I think he's going to be the real deal. We're also waiting for MJ Rice to fully – he's cleared, but we're waiting for him to actually make that leap onto the court and play. Only 3-2. Once we get the word about MJ Rice, we're going to jump in at that 3-2 price. We got our guy Alex there, our NC State expert. Kind of drop some info. Seem like they're going to be just a little bit longer on Rice, but we certainly want to be aware and ready for when to pull the trigger on that one. All right, let me get over to the chat here. I've been going through here. This looks like there are more people here. What's up, Don? What game would you tell me to take cover tomorrow? Yep, give me a second. I'll pull up more odds and I'll help you out with that. I do. Yep, I do like Miami. I don't know if you came late when I was talking about that, but I am all over the Miami spread. I think that's a gift. Honestly. What's up, Alex? Just giving you a shout out. Never again my betting late night game. St. Mary sucks, dude. I mean, I'm just I like to actually give analysis that's not just like this player sucks, this team sucks. The St. Mary's is just underperforming. I shouldn't say they suck, obviously, but they're not very good. And there's like 3 or 4 teams that are really way worse than I expected to be, and St. Mary's is one of them. And that Utah team might actually be much better than we thought as well. But I don't think we can bet St. Mary's very much this year, to be honest. They don't look very good. Anyways, Dennis Parker, all the love there for Dennis Parker there. I know Alex can appreciate that with me. And keep giving us the MJ Rice news. I know you're hard in the lab. You're at work looking for that MJ Rice move and letting us know when we can pull the trigger there. All right, the last game on the slate, Clemson versus Alabama. It's gonna be a tough one for me because honestly, the pay-ups outside of Hunter Dickinson's game against Kentucky have really not been that great. Like there's been some big games. For me, I've kind of whiffed on some of the pay-ups. My best lineups, as usual, have been more balanced. So I'm going to have a really tough decision to make because there's no bigger fan of PJ Hall in this industry than me. The only people that love him more than me would be his actual family. I am a huge PJ Hall guy. When he got injured, over the last year and a half, I was devastated. And then the kid just like, nope, we're not missing any time. Like that, how could you not love the toughness of a guy who anyone else would probably miss like the first month of the season? He's like, nah, we're playing. This is an absolute great spot for him against Alabama. Grant Nelson cannot guard PJ Hall. I am just 100% confident in that. He is going to be such a holy terror for this Alabama team. As much as I like Nick Pringle and had him pegged for kind of a breakout season, it's not actually worked out too well. And he's also been fouling a lot. And when he has to take shifts on PJ Hall, he's going to be on the bench with 2 fouls. Grant Nelson, not capable of guarding PJ Hall. Maybe those are strong words, And I know Grant Nelson's got the high block rate, but he also has a high foul rate, much like Pringle. And I think Hall's just going to have these guys all in the spin cycle, and he's just going to have one of those big ass games. Like, I feel like a 50 burger or more is coming for Hall, much like what he did against UAB 51. Just put up 50 against Alcorn. Obviously, that's Alcorn. Now, people are going to look and be like, he's probably pegged for 28 to 30. We can do better. But Alabama games for years have been just, fantasy goodness galore. They're going to remain that way. And I think that we want to be looking to take players for and against them often. Now, Clemson's defense, I think, deserves respect as well. I don't know that Alabama's necessarily just like going to hang a big number on them. Ken Palm does have it 85-75. The line is +10 for Clemson. I am looking at betting Clemson at +10 because they do not look like 10-point underdogs to me. Total just under 160. I think that Clemson's being way overlooked here. That line seems too high. And I wouldn't be shocked to see that less tomorrow morning when we wake up. But starting on the Clemson side, 9-2, as I mentioned, it's a very high price to pay. Clemson revolves around that kid. They have a coach in Brad Brano who maybe isn't respected by the masses, but he does just enough here. And they, Alabama, clearly the hardest team they've played so far, but they knocked the stuffing out of a decent Boise State team. They did survive against a tough Davidson, and they did survive against a tough UAB. So I could see why maybe they're would be like +7, but +10 just seems a little bit too raunchy for me. I'm going to be betting some Clemson here. Clemson and Miami parlays seems like the way to go. PJ Hall, 9th in the Ken Palm Player of the Year rankings, 30% usage rate, 33% shot rate, drawing 6 fouls per 40. He's even hitting 37% of his threes so far. Block rate of 7%. He can block shots too. Grant Nelson, take that. Has a combined rebounding rate of 29% and an assist rate of 20%. He's a unicorn. PJ Hall is a unicorn. If you haven't figured out yet about PJ Hall, watch this game and get your popcorn if that's your thing, and get ready for him to put on a show against this Alabama team. As far as the rest of Clemson goes, prices are actually advantageous across the board. Chase Hunter at 6-1. He is somebody who's going to be on the floor for big minutes. He does have a tendency to go stretches of time without doing much, which is obviously a problem, but he's going to be the one initiating the offense more often than not. And he's going to be the one benefiting off of any PJ Hall bucket. He has an assist rate of almost 25%. Typically, he's going to be having, his hand in most offensive set, shooting 42% from long range as well. They did bring in Joey Girard, who's out there, 24% shot rate, shooting 39% from long range, but he has a 21% assist rate as well. So Girard, takes a little bit from Hunter there. They kind of both initiate the offense, but Hunter more so. Girard more of the off guard, taking shots. Girard at 5'9" is a GPP play. We know he has downside, but when he catches fire and takes 15 to 20 shots, he can definitely knock a 5'9" price to the moon. So those two prices are advantageous. Ian Schiffelin at 5'6". I think you could probably use him if you got to a last man in situation. He is looking pretty decent for like a 3.5, 4x score there. And this is a matchup against Bama that I do think he can rebound against. Nowhere near the level of PJ Hall, and foul trouble could be something that hampers him. RJ Godfrey, GPP's minutes are sporadic. He played 24 against Boise State and 27 against Davidson, but only 16 against UAB. He does have foul issues. He is only 4'9", though, and he is a very good GPP shot, because if Schiffelin gets into foul trouble, or God forbid Hall is ineffective, gets into foul trouble, Godfrey's going to be asked to play a lot of minutes, and he has shown in the past he can handle it. Good shot blocker, good rebounder, and somebody who is a decent enough prospect that after Hall moves on, I could see him kind of, becoming an alpha type for this team. Then you have Jack Clark. That's a taboo name there. Sorry, Alex. Alex Hemingway, Dylan Hunter, Chauncey Wiggins, like a lot of speculative cheap value type plays who have all had their moments, but are nowhere near a main team lineup caliber type of option. Minutes are going to bounce around for all of those guys, and they're the true definition of role players at best. And then Alabama, Mark Sears has been absolutely crushing. See, this looks like the Mark Sears of Ohio. When he's with Ohio, he's putting together these monster 40-plus fantasy point games. Last year, didn't really assimilate the way you would have thought. Took some time. Was also not healthy as much, but he's come out just absolutely detonating. And against teams, with more than just a pulse. Oregon puts up 46, 27, 7, and 3. That was an absolute monster game for Sears. Probably the last time he'll be under 8K for quite some time. The loss against Ohio State, he put up 17, 4, and 4, 3 steals, another 33. Like, we're just not going to see him under this 8, 5, 9K price very often. I think he's just playing really, really well. And having Aaron Estrada on the team just opens things up for him, because Estrada is such a gifted scorer and attacker that it's just making the game a lot easier for Sears. Speaking of Estrada, he's there at 7.6. I think he's a great option. That price for him under 8K. He hasn't put up the numbers that I would have thought. Early in the season, he put up a near 50, but he's been pretty average for what he did at Hofstra. But obviously he's in a different role here. He's not the alpha take every shot guard. He's still taking a high number of shots. He still has a usage rate and shot rate above 30%. He has an assist rate of 23%, and he's knocking down 52% of his threes on 27 attempts. Sears making 55% on 22 attempts. So both guys have been great. Sears is just doing a little bit more from a DFS standpoint, but we are getting a nice enough discount on Estrada that puts him in the player pool for me, even against a Clemson defense that I do think has the chops to maybe give these guys trouble. Grant Nelson at 8K. I just have been against Grant Nelson. Not a hater, but he has never really done good against upper tier competition throughout his career. Now, he did great against Ohio State, so he made me eat my words there. He put up almost 40 against them, 26 against Oregon. Like, he's still gonna produce, but the prices that he's typically gonna be at here at 8K plus, I don't know that he puts up 40s against teams like this. As they get to SEC play, I think you're going to see Nelson kind of take a big step back, and maybe a guy like Pringle start to play more and more effective as well. Rylan Griffin has kind of struggled throughout the season, but against Oregon, they did give him 31 minutes, and he responded. He had a couple threes, 26 fantasy points there at 5-3. Griffin and Pringle are two players that I thought were big breakout candidates for this season. I saw what we did, Griffin did last game. If he's going to continue to get those kind of minutes, that's nice. Can't use Pringle right now. His price has dropped to 5.3. Another bad game will put him below 5K. Stay tuned on when we can use him. Not yet, but we're getting closer. Latrell Wrightsell, who has kind of sleptwalked through the season, he had a big game against Oregon as well. It just shows you that this Alabama team, there's so much more than just Mark Sears or Aaron Estrada. They are really deep. And they even have the younger kids, Sam Walters, who hasn't gotten the big minutes off the bench, but he is a vicious and quick trigger shooter. He put up 24 fantasy points against South Alabama in 16 minutes, not blowout. He's not the guy you want to use in competitive games, but any projected blowouts for Alabama, Walters is absolutely worth a look. And Davin Cosby has a ton of upside as well, but just a blowout play, not in competitive games either. But the amount of talent on this Alabama team it's absolutely ridiculous. You also have Jaron Stevenson at 4.9, somebody pushing 20, 22 minutes, certainly viable. But I would really stick to either Sears or Estrada if you're going to go with somebody here on the Bama side. It is a very, very tough slate. There are so many good options up there in the 7 to 8K range, and not a ton of slam dunk values. I think we see Caldwell end up being super chalky at 4K out of necessity, not because he's necessarily the best play ever at that price, but he offers us salary savings that we're absolutely going to need. Perhaps we look at Tyrell Ward of LSU instead of Reed or God, why am I drawing a blank here? Will Baker, who's more expensive, just out of necessity, a value forward that we can use and as minutes trending up. We have the kid for Georgia Tech, as long as he starts a second game, Bayandongo. We have the value available to us. We have Notre Dame, perhaps Shrewsbury. Perhaps he puts his son in a position to have to play a lot. Missouri has several options under 5K. There is some looks that we can use here. If you want to believe in Parker at 5'2", there is the options to do so. Let's talk cores here. We'll interact with the chat a little bit, and then we'll get out of here. And also, Don, if you're looking, if you're like on your last leg and you're needing a winner, let's see what we can find for you, because there are a couple tomorrow that I feel pretty good about, honestly. All right, so core play number one comes with the caveat that is starting. I assume he will, but stranger things have happened. Bay and Dongo at 4K for Georgia Tech. I don't necessarily love that matchup against Mississippi State, but starting cheap. He's going to be chalky. He reeks of being a chalk bust, just absolutely reeks of putting up like a 2. And he probably will, but we need that salary saving. So we're going to core him as play number one. Second core play here might surprise you because it's not PJ Hall. But I'm leaning into Uga Poplar at 7-1. It's a price that I think people will not be able to get to. They're either going to play those 2 to 3 values and then stuff in a 8-5 or more player, and the 7K range is going to go relatively untouched by the masses. So Uga Poplar at this moment, I want a Miami player. I have to have a Miami player. He's the one that I'm zeroing in on. His price is reasonable. He's jammed in there between Cleveland and Pack. Joseph's not really trustworthy in a main lineup on the road at Kentucky. Poplar, I think, is. So he's core play number 2. And then the third core, there's a lot of different looks and a lot of players that I like and a lot of fringe cores. So my player pool might be a little more ballooned. I'll try to work on it tonight to carve it down and make it somewhat reasonable for a 7-game slate. I'm looking at NC State. You're probably thinking, oh, he's just going to core Parker again, but this is the Jaden Taylor game, man. 6'4", the most consistent option on the pack right now. It's a price we can get to. If we're not paying up, we need to stuff our lineup full of mid-range guys. Keats has a knack over the years for churning out and developing high-end DFS/fantasy guards. And I think Jaden Taylor is just like the perfect guard for him. He fits everything that Keats wants to do. His minutes are trending upwards in a game like this where it'll probably go down to the wire. Taylor will be asked to play huge minutes, might not even come off the court, but, a few water breaks here or there, play 36 minutes. It just makes so much sense at 6'4". I love the play of Jaden Taylor. I will also have a strong debate about Parker, but at this point, Jaden Taylor is a core play for me on the Super Show here today. Never thought I'd say that, but Jaden Taylor, you are going to carry the mantle, and Dongo as well for that value piece. This slate's interesting. I think it's going to be really, really spread out, and then Uga Poplar as our third member of the core there. All right, let's pull up some PrizePicks, see if they got anything out yet. It's 10:50 on the West Coast, and I am finishing a coffee. You know how we do it out here. Also, I want to start like a segment at the end of the show, like once we start rolling out Posh Play of the Day, who I'm most afraid to fade, who's going to harm us, who's going to bust that we love, which player is, has no business breaking the slate but will. Like, I'm just going to come up with categories like that and cool little fun segment at the end. I've been thinking on that. I think that's a cool little thing that we'll roll out. All right, we have a boatload of PRAs here that are very advantageous, and I think we're gonna be hitting the PRA train hard on PrizePicks. Starts with core play Jaden Taylor, 19.5 points, rebounds, and assists versus Ole Miss. Come on, Jaden Taylor's too good. He'll probably score, like I said, 14 to 15 real, so he doesn't have to do too much over that to hit that number. That's probably my number one prop right there on the board initially. over 19.5 PRA for Jaden Taylor. Love that one. Let's see. Wooga Poplar. Let's see what his points prop is before we do that. Poplar's point total 14.5 versus Kentucky. Pax is at 16.5. Cleveland's at 15.5. Norchad 14.5. So they have them grouped together pretty much. Poplar's PRA is 21.5, which I like that. You know, pretty much anyone that is under 23, I feel pretty confident in the over for players like this. But I think I might hit Poplar's point prop instead, which is 14.5. He has hit that in 4 of his first 5 games comfortably. 18, 23, 21, 13 was the game he missed, which was against Georgia, but he had 11 rebounds, and then 15 in the game against Kansas State. So over 14.5 real points for Wooga Poplar. We're locking that in as well. Since I'm not a believer in Chris Bell, I'm going to take his under 13 real points versus LSU. I don't take unders very well, or very often, I should say. But Chris Bell under 13 points. We're locking that one in as well. And let's take a look at the rebounds numbers here. Norchad over 9 rebounds versus Kentucky. Yes, please. That is a really confident one for me. Even if he were to get in foul trouble, I don't see how they keep him under double-digit rebounds. DJ Burns, 4.5 rebounds versus Ole Miss. That's a pretty intriguing number. Looking at Burns, who I like, 7, 9, 1, 7, and 4. That's a pretty low number. I think we'll take the over 4.5 rebounds for DJ Burns versus Ole Miss. That's, you know, maybe not a lock and load, but that's far too low there. And PJ Hall, 6.5 rebounds versus Alabama, also a number we like. So some advantageous numbers that we can hit, no doubt. All right, let's get over here. Jaden Taylor, let's go! Oh yeah. All right, so let's talk some seriously about bets here, because there's a lot that seem pretty decent to me, like LSU plus 1.5, just sprinkle, you know, obviously money line there. I actually like them to beat Syracuse. Can be tough taking road teams in college, especially close road dogs, but it is something that has been fairly profitable in the past, and I do like to pick my spots there. So I like that. Let's see. Miami, DK is already to plus 5.5, and I had that in at plus 6 also. Like, that's just going to go down. I should run, not walk, to put that in everywhere, because I just don't see Miami, one, losing by more than 2 points if they lose, and 2, I'd probably just winning the game against Kentucky, right? I would be actually surprised if they didn't win. I like Missouri plus 6.5, but admit that is probably a little risky, especially if you're looking for, like, you know, you're throwing down a bet on something that you're like, okay, this is the one bet I'm putting all my money on tonight. It's probably not the one you want to do. NC State money line versus Ole Miss. I think they just win outright. It's only 1 point spread, so I would just take them to win outright. I do like that. Clemson plus 10. I already mentioned that one. Like, I'm befuddled by that. I honestly am befuddled by that. Maybe I'm overvaluing Clemson too much, and maybe I'm undervaluing Alabama, but they're not 10-point dogs to Alabama, right? Seems rather silly to me. That's one I'm gonna either, like I said, get myself into a lot of trouble on, or look like a genius at the end of the night tomorrow. There's also one, Idaho State versus Pepperdine. Idaho State is plus 7.5. Neither team has been particularly great. It is a road game for Idaho State. But Pepperdine, they've lost a lot of talent. They are still coached by my man Lorenzo Romar. Defensively, they're bottom of the barrel when it comes to defense. They have Ethan Anderson, who's been around the block as a transfer. They've lost 4 straight games. They played a decent pace, but I don't foresee them being, 8-point winners in too many games this year, regardless if they're at home or not. So I do like a little bit of sneak here with Idaho State plus 7.5. It is a lot of road dogs, which, like I said, in college can be troublesome, but just some really advantageous numbers here. If you can take only one, you have the gun to the head, as they say, and there's only one that I got to be right about, or it's lights out. North Carolina State, just straight up over Ole Miss. Chris Beard is a say what you will about him off the court, but he's a surgeon on it, but he's not there yet with this roster. Keats does not get respect from the masses. This NC State team is way better than people realize. They're going to beat Ole Miss straight up here. It'll be close. It'll be butt-clenchingly close. It'll be a tilt fest for sure. But Jaden Taylor, as long as he delivers a 5X plus performance and NC State walks out of there with a win, we are going to be very happy. But that is the win at all cost bet for me. NC State straight up over Ole Miss. A lot of Wolfpack love on the show tonight, which I know Alex can appreciate. All right, I think that'll do it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow evening to talk about the Wednesday slate. Also back on the articles Wednesday. The CFB Super Show will be back on Thursday night, 9 p.m. as well, and then the Friday night version of the CBB Super Show Q&A show on Saturday morning. Many shows to go. Much more content coming your way. Let's continue to roll. Let's do our thing. Thanks for everyone who continues to support the show, and we'll be back tomorrow night. Same time, same place, same green screens. I'm out.